Did you know there are many ways to educate your child? And would you like to learn about some of these educational solutions right now? I hope so, because you are here with Education Options TV with David James Rodriguez, special guests, as we are empowering parents by introducing them to respectful models of learning. And I'm very excited about the two guests that we have on today, co-founders of Luminary Learning Village. We have Mercedes Gearhart and Oxana Obstrosky, and I'm very blessed to have them. They've been doing a self-directed learning center in the Bay Area for a few years, and great stories of leadership and courage and visionary parenting and teaching, I would say, and facilitating, actually, that's the word. So before we get into it, welcome to the show, Mercedes and Oxana.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you for having us. Finally.
Yeah, thank
Yes.
you. Thanks for the intro.
It's a joy to be with you guys, you gals. And for all the mothers and fathers out there, stay tuned because we're going to hear their story, share about solutions to the forced schooling model. And they're going to share their story. I'll share my story a little bit of why we're doing this and the solutions that you parents can begin to implement as soon as tomorrow, as soon as today. You don't have to wait a year or 2 years or 3 years. In my work, I'm principal of Valor Academy. I do early high school graduation and homeschool consulting with Homeschool Leader. I notice there's a lot of fear inside of parents, and I don't think it's a legitimate fear. It's more of a fabricated fear from the state and from the corporations, but it feels real. I'm not invalidating the fear, but I think there's two different things to fear, and one is the state school system, and one is your capabilities as a teacher or guide or facilitator, and you can learn these things. So who would like to share first about your story with co-creating Luminary Learning Village and share what that is for the audience, and we can dive deeper into how you do it and why you do it and some of the benefits that some of the audience members can listen to.
Well, I think Mercedes should start because, you two go back, in the past.
This is true. This is true. I'm happy to start. Yeah, this is a full circle here with David, being able to talk to him in this platform and listening to him so long ago talking about homeschool options before I even thought it was an option for myself. So yeah, I'd say my journey started pretty early as far as looking for something different than what was being offered. I went through the path of like, is it going to be Waldorf? Is it going to be Montessori? Not really at that time when Izzy was small. And I have a daughter who's 10 years old. So I've been on this journey for a long time looking for the answers, which we're about to tell you about soon.
Yes. Right.
So yeah, I guess we're going to fast forward then to 2020 and still not having an option, and then COVID happening and me really having to find alignment pretty quick with people who were questioning everything, not just school, but like what's going on right now. Is this something we should be worried about? Like, so I was all over the place as far as many things in life at the time, but education was always on the back burner for me and always a priority, and me always just coming up empty when it came to like alternative solutions for education. It's almost just like something that you type in thinking like, what do you think you're gonna pull up? It's different for everybody, as far as what we're looking for. Some people can find a lot of alignment with what's being presented right now, but for myself, that journey started early and just really got kicked into gear 2020 because it allowed me to really have to see things for what they were. And I think it's such a perfect thing to say, right? In 2020, I had to get my vision. I had to get my vision right. And that vision started with finding alignment for people who wanted a place for their kids to gather, a place to hold hands and, see each other face to face. So it started there. And then further along the line, I meet people like Oxana who came in at a perfect time because still trying to find what was going to be the solution for education for our children. It was still kind of coming up empty. So it's not easy to find what you're looking for if you don't really know sometimes what you're looking for. I think that's what like happened for me. It was like, well, this just doesn't seem good enough. So luckily finding people like Oxana and really being open-minded and us coming across a self-directed learning environment, which sounded amazing because what we were trying to do over the years has been really hard to replicate what we want in the environment that we're in, being where if we're going to be outside for a given amount of time, you're limited to what you can eventually do with nature. You tap out, especially at an age limit too. Some kids are not into being teenagers, being in the park, you know. But yeah, so learning along the way what worked and what didn't work. And then I just believe self-directed education is just the solution for everything. I mean, because we all
Yeah.
are learning all the time. And that's the problem with we've been told, is that learning only happens in this controlled environment with the teacher leading. Whereas I don't think we realize as parents, our the learning is happening 24 hours a day, even in their sleep, even, you know, everything you're doing at home with your kids, that's learning. So this whole paradigm of having to like reject that, like, this is the only way your children are going to be educated was definitely, I don't think that hard of a pill for me to swallow, just because I kind of have already started, I've been swallowing pills for a long time.
Truth pills.
Those red pills. Yeah. So, yeah. And then I can lead into Oxana finding us, and then just, you know, just further showing the importance of why the self-directed education option is just like the way. We're not going to deviate from this plan anymore, because we found what works for kids, especially our little group that we have going. We've had a consistent group, a little small core group, I guess, over the last few years of our experimentation process. But yeah, it's still an experiment. I mean, to me, in my opinion, I would rather experience with my children, with these children, and see what comes out than what's being provided, you know, because what I've seen in the end, I just haven't seen children that are thriving. And I think that's the message that we're always looking at. And that's always the work right there. Are your children thriving? No matter whether in their environment for learning, whether they're at home, we always have to be asking ourselves deeper questions than we ever have, because it's a different world than when we were raised in, you know. Just seeing kids playing outside. When I look at this self-directed environment, all that Oxana provides, because as you will learn, she is our main facilitator, and we hope to get more, obviously, but as you go into these arenas, you start seeing how limited it is for these options existing, you know, and sustaining themselves. That's the real problem, is like we're always on the verge of shutting down. So for many different reasons, but yeah, just not having this so mainstreamed, and people just not really getting what the options look like when you're not worried about duplicating school at home, because that's the other thing, is we have to start to trust and de-school ourselves from that process of believing, like I said, you know, learning is always happening in this environment, and the age division that's happening, and there's so many factors that, you know, you have to consider when it comes to like learning, and how they're just not present in, you know, that environment that the school is so-called providing for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Great intro. Nice to hear. And Oxana, so you started the Self-Directing Learning Center, Mercedes, in 2020, and then Oxana came in later, or how did you guys?
No, we weren't really self-directed at that time. We just, at that time, what would we call ourselves? I'd say, since I was there in the very beginning, it was like, let's play with the fact that our kids want to socialize and be together, you know, and provide them with some fun and like enrichment. That's where we were at that time, because everything was closed, you know. So
yeah, lockdown. Was schools locked down at that point?
Yeah, pretty much. And we were part of a forest school, which I was like, we'll be cool. We're in the forest, you know, kids are outside. But no, they went to Zoom too, which, you know, that's when I really had to ask myself the question, like, okay, well, who's in charge here? Like, aren't we the parents in charge? Aren't we the experts of our children? Shouldn't I be making that decision? So yeah, it's really asking yourself that question of, like you always say, who's in charge of my body? Right? So to get back to your question, we did not start with self-directed. We started self-directed 2 years ago. It came at just like magically to us at the right time, the right people, synchronicity. And then we started, that's when we started the self-directed 2 years ago. Before that, like I said, it was just an experiment. We threw a little bit of Waldorf in there, a little bit of Montessori, see what landed. Because again, at that time, still really not knowing what a mixed age environment looks like for kids, you know, and just taking away, like having the capacity to really trust and be creative with what you have around and who you have around, you know, and still able to, like grow and not get so stuck into something. Because if we would have that attitude, we probably wouldn't be where we're at if we were like, no, we're just going to have, you know, this Waldorf way or something, you know, because even those schools struggle, you know, those places also are not thriving. But
Yeah, yeah, we're in the beginning of a new paradigm. What I see, I mentioned that homeschooling has increased rapidly over the last 4 years, and even the last 10 years and 15 years. You see this kind of graph just going up, and I think it will continue. And the first option is to get the children out of the school system, and that seems to be one of the challenges. I'm curious, Oksana, because you're one of the champions there doing self-directed facilitation. And we had some great chat there at Music and Sky at the Luminary Learning Village stage. How did you come across self-directed learning, Oksana, and how did you become a champion for that?
Well, the divine, the divine coincidence. Well, I kind of want to start a little earlier because when I was looking for a solution for my kids, I have two boys, they're almost 9 and 11. I first was like, okay, well, any school in America is going to be better than in Russia, right? So I'm from Russia. That was my first kind of like thinking about it. Then, of course, I looked into all the options that we have here in the East Bay, like Montessori, Waldorf, and I landed on project-based. So my whole thing was that it doesn't make sense for me to separate life into subjects. Like that was my thing. And I'm like, project-based learning makes sense because we're not separating life into, oh, this is math and this is biology and this is chemistry. And I love the whole idea of solving problems because I think it brings up the topic of personal responsibility and creativity. So that was important for me. So I found a charter for my older son. And I think I guess like the moment where I was like questioning what did I do to my kid was after a couple months in kindergarten, he stopped playing at home. So I was like, what is happening? He just wants to do some worksheets at age 5. This is wrong, like it felt wrong to me. But I also have a younger kid who was 3 at that time. So I felt like I was just overwhelmed to even find any other solution. And I was kind of like, okay, it's okay for now, right? And then, of course, 2020 is the time when we all challenged ourselves, hopefully all, with our views and paradigms. And what served me was that, everyone moved to Zoom school. And that's when I saw that there is no project-based learning whatsoever. It's still telling kids, this is going to be the project and this is how you're going to solve it. So basically they call it project-based, but essentially it was just still telling kids what to do, when to do, how to do it. And very quickly I was like, that's it, I'm done with this. And of course the whole Zoom aspect and, you not seeing people in person, that definitely didn't, resonate with me. So I was pretty desperate, like writing to all the Facebook groups and places. And I was lucky to find Tiani and Mercedes, who was like, okay, come this day to the park. And when I saw like all this, I don't know, 40 people at that time, probably, or 50 people hanging out, and that's the time of lockdowns, I was just, I literally was in tears because I'm like, oh, I found my tribe. And that's when I pulled the kids out of school, and I joined their nature program first. But we already had a conversation about starting something indoor as well, because nature twice a week didn't feel like just enough, enough of variety of things that we can offer. And that's when we started to look for places, and we did find a place in Alameda, kind of like a commercial space. And for us, that back then, like Mercedes said, it was all about resources that we had around us, right? And since so many teachers were in fear as well, we had teachers that were able to provide Waldorf and Montessori approach, but really it was not about approaches back then. For us, it was like, okay, we need to continue getting together. We need to continue having kids together, creating the space for them where they can live so-called normal life or healthy life, in our opinion. So we were kind of just doing that and didn't pay attention much to like the whole approach, I'd say. And after, like when lockdowns were lifted and people started to be able to go places, and some of them were even questioning the whole homeschooling aspect, the whole alternative education, because, you know, the regular school comes with a lot of convenience, right? Like, oh, drop off, pick up, or extended hours.
Yeah.
So those people who were there just for emergency reasons, a lot of them, you know, disappeared pretty quickly. But then those who stayed, we didn't feel like there was an alignment in terms of, okay, where are we moving forward in terms of learning, right? And how we learn. And that's when we discovered, actually through a parent who introduced us to the founder of Agile Learning Centers. She was like, oh, I learned about this new thing, and you might be interested. So we were very intrigued. We talked for maybe 3 hours to the founder, and that's when we were like, okay, this sounds amazing. This sounds like actual freedom approach to education, which, you know, we big advocates for freedom. So we started to dig deeper, and that's when we found out the whole approach is called self-directed education. And for the last 2 years, I mean, first year was really transitioning because we had to convince many people that that's the way to go. And I think that was the reason why we separated from some people, because, you know, you can bring the horse to the water, you can't force to drink it. So we realized that it's better to just depart from each other and focus on what we value. And that's when I think it was actually the Music in Sky, the previous one, when after driving from it, I was like, I just love being around kids. That's my jam. I just love facilitating, which is not the same as teaching for sure, like you said. And yeah, after driving from there, I was like, oh, I think maybe at some point I can be a facilitator. And then many things happen, and then I became a facilitator. And yeah, it's been a year now since we have been doing it in a private location, and I've been facilitating.
It's beautiful. Every time I hear the word self-directed learning or self-directed education, I get so excited, because that is the highest level of education, in my opinion, right? Where you don't have to force them, you don't have to coax them. And I talk about like the 4 phases of homeschooling, and it might be helpful for some of the terminology that we might get into. The first one is school at home. And I think you call it play school, right? We're going to take the kids out of school and bring them home, and we're going to play school. I just say they're trying to duplicate the school system in the kitchen or in the living room, which is better than having them in the school system. But you want to evolve to deschooling, which is to release the pressure they've been under in a compulsory learning environment. You know, if they're forced to do assignments, forced to read, it's anti-educational. So you want to, for every year they're in a forced learning environment, give them a month of total freedom, and let them sleep if they want to sleep, let them play video games, whatever it is. They need to decompress and get back to homeostasis of who they are when they're 4, 5, 6 years old. And they're like, yes, we're going to the grocery store. Yeah, exciting, right? It's adventure. Versus, like you said, your kindergartner stopped playing, and that's not normal. And then the next phase is homeschooling. And I define homeschooling as when a leader creates an atmosphere where personalized learning can occur. So that's where you got to create that space, which is welcome mistakes, welcome experiments, as you say, Mercedes, welcome trial and error. This is actually how learning is done in scientific laboratories. They have hypothesis, and they try it, and they see what works and see what doesn't work. And then the apex is self-directed learning. Some people call it unschooling, child-led learning, whatever you want to call it. But it's now where the individual is, like us, we're learning now. You know, we're adults, and we read and we pick up stuff and we write stuff, and we're in the learning process because we love it and we see how it benefits our life. So I want to ask, because I heard it, and I feel it also, that some parents see what's going wrong in the school system, but they don't see the bridge to get them out and to do something different inside their home, probably because they went to public school and they have all this propaganda, just like we do, of, you know, you're not qualified to be a teacher, you got to be accredited and, you know, certified and all these things. It's like, maybe, but if you think forcing a child to learn what you think they need to learn, if you think that's education, then it's not. And John Taylor Gatto was a big inspiration for me, and he distinguished the difference between schooling and education. And his definition, which I added a little bit too, is that schooling is when someone else forces you to do something to benefit them, versus education is what you do to yourself to create a good life. And this is a conversation I don't think I ever had, maybe in a philosophy class in college, but for the most part, there was no question of like, what's a good life? You know, how should I spend my life on earth and invest my time and energy, this sacred thing that divine has given us all? It's just like, get good grades, get a job, and go work in the corporations. And now I see the importance of helping young people learn entrepreneurship, basic presentation skills, and art, creativity, imagination. These things are more important. So maybe Oxana or Mercedes can talk about what does a self-directed school look like in your experience, or do you call it that? Do you call it self-directed learning center, or it's called Luminary Learning Village, which is beautiful. But when like let's say a new parent is interested, like, my gosh, I can't believe what's going on in the schools, public schools, you know, what is Luminary Learning Village? Is there a sound bite or a short answer that you can give them so they're like, yeah, I got that, or it's like they still can't get it?
Well, we definitely self-directed learning center. That's what we call. And then of course you need to like dig deeper and understand even more what it is. And when you ask, what does it look like? It looks messy. I like to say that it looks messy. It's nothing like Waldorf or Montessori in that sense, because
Yeah.
I think the line is blurred between actual life and like so-called learning center. I mean, honestly, I think like Mercedes and I, we agree that we don't even like calling it learning center. Like, you know, like I know we have to define it so that, you know, people can find us online, but essentially it is a village in many ways, because you know, people come together. Mercedes, you okay if I start to tell a little
please
story
do.
of...
I feel like you're gonna nail this one.
Yeah. So as you like, we're definitely not trying to replicate the school structure, right? This is number one priority. So in that sense, every parent, they are homeschooling. We don't like homeschooling term in that sense as well, because, you know, we don't want to replicate school at home, but legally every parent is homeschooling, right, in our community. Which is important in a way, because not everyone has the luxury of maybe not working or working from home and being with their kids 7 days a week, right? So we do have a choice. People can bring their kids minimum 2 days or maximum of 5 days here, right? And the way we use Agile Learning Center's tools, we don't call ourselves Agile Learning Center, but we do use their tools, which is just how they structure themselves, that people can use it. And the main thing, what happens is that like the frame for our day would be that kids come. We of course have like a transitional moment where everyone is, you know, get the wiggles out, talk to each other, connect, reconnect, and then we come together for a morning meeting. And morning meeting is all about setting up intention for the day. And of course, depending on the age of the kids, we have kids from 5 to 17. Some of the 5-year-olds now turned 6, so I don't think we have 5-year-olds yet anymore. But depends on the age of the kids. Some love the meeting, others like, okay, I want to be over with it. And that's actually something that differentiates Agile Learning Centers from democratic schools. That in democratic schools, from what I know, there is a big emphasis on like meetings. Let's meet together. Let's do this voting. Let's decide. You know, there's a lot of like that focus, which I think here all the meetings serve a different purpose. So the meetings actually has to go quickly. That's the idea. So we set up intention, we reconnect, because there's so many things happening. One kid can say, I'm building, I'll use some current projects. I'm building this table for outside. You know, if you want to join me, people can join them. And that becomes what we call offering. So some projects or some intentions can become a group project or a group intention. Or someone will say, I want to play Dungeon and Dragon today, and then the group is formed, right? But then also it can be planning for a week, planning for a month, things like, again, don't like call them field trips, just being outside the space and exploring where we live, right? Exploring the Bay Area. We have so many things here to do. And that can be also something that we plan in those morning meetings. And the other meeting that plays a big role, and so that people understand that self-directed learning is a lot about context, is about a lot about culture. It's not about content. I think that's one of the things that people are, falsely people believe that it's important what you learn, but a lot of times we learn from our environment more than, anything. And that's why one of the meetings, they call it Change Up. And we are right now part of this training from an organization called Radical Learning. And I like what they did. They called it actually not Change Up, they called it Connect Up. So the purpose of that meeting and that tool is to co-create culture. So another aspect of self-directed center is that we don't force clearly, and it's all about actually agreeing to things and making decisions together. And there is no like that, we all grew up in the structures where the power is over. So we call it power with. And same goes for the facilitator. I can't kind of force them into something, which honestly I find very difficult anyway. So I feel like a lot of teachers are burned out just because they have to be in that position of constant force, which is draining. Because and if you equip with tools on how to facilitate meetings, how to make group decisions, then it goes, sometimes super easy and quick. Sometimes, of course, there's some iterations to those meetings. But Connect Up and Change Up in general just helps us co-create the culture, co-create some agreements in the space as a community. And same goes with parents as well, right? Like, I mean, I don't think we're there yet with parents, but a lot of times we want to use the same approach and make sure that they learn those tools so kids don't have this separation. Oh, I'm trusted in the learning center, but I'm not trusted at home. So we do a lot of conversation, provide resources for parents to actually catch up with their own unschooling. So in a nutshell, that's how Learning Center is organized, that we have only 2 types of meetings. Kids love it because when they're the ones who co-create agreements and cultures, they know this is their tool to really voice their concerns or like voice their ideas. So those who love that kind of group activity or communication, they jump right in, they find solutions. And then again, you don't have to force it because they are the ones who come up with it. They are the ones who decide what makes sense. That's another approach that we use. It's called sociocracy. You're probably familiar with that. And it's a lot about not voting and tyranny of majority. It's a lot about making sense, finding a solution that makes sense for the group. And sometimes consent, that's another term that we use, right? Everything is consent-based. Sometimes consent doesn't sound like yes, like exciting yes. You can have like, yes, we're doing this. Sometimes it can be safe for now, we call it, we kind of show it with the hand like this. So it's yes, I'm willing to try. I'm not excited about it, but it's still a consent. And then if there is a strong no, it means we have an opportunity to explore what's going on, then there is, when the person says no, it means they have some kind of observation or objection that might benefit the group if we address it. So that's kind of how we roll with group decisions. And we encourage parents to do the same at home, because parents can feel burned out just because they try to be that authoritative figure at home and like this is what we're gonna do, you know.
Mhm.
While kids are very open to collaborate and talk to parents and find solutions at home, you know.
That's
So
right.
that unschooling is a very important activity that parents have to do in practice. Because a lot of times when parents bring a concern about kids, I'm like, nope, your kids are fine. Kids are doing great.
Are you, oh, did you say unschooling or deschooling?
Well, I mean,
Or how do you
deschooling,
define them?
unschooling, I mean, it's the same, right? I think unschooling is still not a final point. You cannot claim I'm unschooled, I'm fully unschooled, you know? So yeah, deschooling that leads to your unschooling, but I don't know. I guess I'm not really caught up into the definitions of
So,
those, but the
yeah.
whole, I mean, if you want to define it, you know, if you want
Sure,
to,
sure. Unschooling. I hear there's two different options. Like unschool means to not school yourself, right? To like undo what has been done to us. As I mentioned, the Gatto quote, schooling is what they do to us, and real learning is what I do to myself. And that's where I really fell in love with these voluntary schools. Agile is one of them, and then Acton, Apogee, Sudbury's, and the movie that I recommend parents all watch. It's a democratic school, but it's very well done. It's about a real school. It's been around for 100 years in England called Summerhill from 2008. That movie's online for free, and you see what it's like when the child is empowered to direct their own learning. And it's the complete opposite of being forced to learn. And if you want your child to be a leader and lead themselves and have a great, healthy, independent, responsible adult life, then you want to allow them to make decisions early, take responsibility early, and fail in the safety of the home, fail in the safety of the community. And of course, there's going to be scuffles or disagreements, but from what I've noticed in the research is that there's very little or zero bullying happening in these voluntary schools, because in the forced state schools, the children are disrespected. You got to get permission to get a drink of water, to go to the bathroom. I mean, this is a violation of their human rights from God. I mean, this is a serious problem, and the kids feel that. So I think it is important that parents understand what is an education and start with the basics of what do you desire for your child. And it is kind of difficult because many of them, let's say, are Ivy League, well-educated, degreed people. So they're like, well, this is what I did and it worked for me. And you're like, well, it's a whole different world now, as you said, Mercedes. And these things are the most revolutionary learning technologies in the history of humanity. A smartphone, we're connected to so much information, and now AI is coming out. So in the next 5 years, nobody knows what is going to be a successful career, or whatever the child has is forms of opportunity. But we do know this: they must enjoy learning. In fact, it's better if they love learning and they come out of the womb loving learning, just looking big eyes at the world, and they can learn multiple languages if you can teach them and facilitate that. But then once they're forced, now they start to dislike that type of environment. And one thing about Agile, I wanted to ask, because I did some studying of Agile, and actually one of the co-founders spoke at my Education Options Expo in like 2016. And if I recall correctly, the 4 steps for the beginning of the day or week or month is you say what's all possible. So what's all possible, what I'm doing now, what's next, and then what did I do at the end? Because parents are paying money for your learning center and facilitation, so it's like, well, what did you learn today? And so at the end of the day, I don't know if that's what the change up or connect up meeting is about. You can say, I wanted to do this and then I end up doing this, and you have some type of achievements. They might have done it at the end of the week, I'm not quite sure. So is it something like that? You set intentions and then you say like everything's possible. It's just like, this is the intention I'm doing. And then if I want to change up throughout the day, I can change it anytime I want.
yeah, I think in our case, we don't emphasize it as those steps necessarily, but it happens in connection with kids anyway, you know, like because it's all about connection. I think that's what parents sometimes don't understand.
Yeah.
You know, they kind of think that the achievements and, you know, like I don't know, just even projects become such priority for parents. like I want to see the result, you know,
Mm.
that we actually stay away from that in some sense, because it's all about connecting with the kid and like having that dialogue. And
Mm.
when they have been in the process of doing something, even if it doesn't result in something they intended, you can still have a conversation about, you know, what their experience is like, and what kind of, yeah, just like what kind of how to say, what did they learn in their opinion, you know? Although I honestly see that kids burn out of that question. Like parents like to ask that question. What did you
Yeah.
learn today?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to jump in on this point too, because I think exactly it's a very adult question, and we tend to like, and it's also a very schooled question. It's also
Mhm.
back to like having to de-school yourself. Like when you ask a kid what they learn, they may say nothing, and they don't really know like with the self-directed approach, there's so many things to celebrate on any given day, but because some people are programmed to think like, oh, well, what did you create, Timmy? Let me see the artwork. If that doesn't come out, then there wasn't things to celebrate. So what I really love about the agile approach, and it made me so happy to hear Oxana say when she knew she wanted to be a facilitator, because I think she provides so much magic in this environment that kids are learning so much. They don't even know how to tell you what they learn because there's so much happening. And from an adult point of view, like if I wanted to break it down from an occupational therapy perspective, because that's my background, I could tell you the social emotional skills, the sharing component, the things that actually really matter, the confidence that they're building by continuing to work on a project that may present challenges, but then they went and talked to a peer who provided them some counsel or more encouragement. So there's just so many beautiful things happening within children when you provide what Oxana does, which is this safety net of being able to explore every organic curiosity coming from yourself. Isn't that like, how could we ever go any other direction besides that, right? That being your
That's right.
day. So, my daughter, like I've never seen her always have such commitment to like going to a place, and she's never like, I don't want to go unless like obviously she's like expressing healing symptoms or something. But for the most part, she loves being around Oksana. And this is the thing that you have to ask yourself too, parents who are like, well, I want to be able to do some of what you're doing, implement it, whether you're homeschooling right now or you have your child in school, is lose that lens of thinking that you need to be a qualified credentialed teacher. You do not need to have that. I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm just saying that what Oksana provides, I'm so glad she doesn't have that, because I think it would really cause her to be resorting back to that teaching role and not letting kids feel safe in an environment where she's just trying to let them explore agency and autonomy and become lifelong passionate learners. It doesn't stop like it in that center, it happens all the time. And that's why we don't like to, it's like we have to define this whole new language for what we're doing, because even we don't like homeschooling. We're not doing school at home. We don't like field trips. This is daily life stuff that we're taking our kids to, we're letting them be a part of. And one thing that does hurt me when it comes to this journey is how much kids are discriminated against when they're out in public during school hours and they're not like, behind the bars. So that kind of, I wish there would be more acceptance and more like places open to having hours for people that are educating their children at homes or outside of the so-called classroom. So I'd like to see more community support and involvement, and let that be a new language for businesses, saying like, oh yeah, we have a homeschool day, or we give discounts to homeschool families. That's nice for us because everything, especially in the Bay Area, costs so much money, and you want to go on days where things are free, but you want your kids to get something out of it and not be dealing with, oh, it's so crowded here, so.
Yeah, that's a great point. We mentioned it a couple times. I think maybe Oksana, you can touch on it, the facilitation versus the teacher role. This is a big one, and I'll help parents and I'll tell them, I say, yes, you are a teacher, but you're not really. If anything, you're a model. Your child is mimicking your language. They're mimicking your emotions. They're looking to you in the eyes for the first 7, 8 years, just like, please tell me something positive about myself. What am I? This is a whole other question to approach, with the music and sky community, which is like, we are the beings of God or children of God or something special, man. This human consciousness is a big deal. And so I agree. It hurts me too when I see children be discriminated against, be dehumanized, be demoralized. And these are the most precious, sensitive, in tune, empathetic humans on the earth, they should get the most compassion. And I think that's where I get a lot of my enthusiasm, maybe you too, because I know what we're doing is right. And there is a future coming, and hopefully in our lifetimes, maybe not, that there's no more children in these forced learning environments. They are day prisons, they are factories of child abuse, and even worse, now they're teaching them to mutilate their genitals, and it's not acceptable. So this is the solution, or one of the solutions, these self-directed learning centers and models, and getting the kids out. And the philosophy at my school is that the world is the classroom, and that anything and anybody you can learn from can be a teacher. So open it up, change the language paradigm, and begin to evolve beyond what the state tells us and what you feel in your heart and what your child is literally telling you. I had one client, the daughter was 10 years old, and she was in school, and they were forcing her to do a speech. She's 10 years old, and they gave her these subjects, and she's like, I don't want to do a presentation on any of those things. And she's literally telling that to the mother. The mother's on board, but the father was not. And so there was this tug and pull in the relationship. It's like she's literally saying, don't force me to do that. And so I say, do you like to be forced to do something you don't want to do? No. So you don't need to do that. But let's talk about the distinction between a facilitator and teacher, Oksana, if you would touch on that, please.
Yes, this one is a big one. And actually something I want to recommend right from the get-go is that we are part of the Self-Directed Education Network as well. And if you go on their website, they just released a big article on what facilitation means for self-directed education. And they actually did a big research on that. So if you're interested in to read in like details, I think it's a well-written article by my friend, Janice. So that's a good resource to learn about it. But from what I see is that first and foremost, like you said, modeling. So there is this aspect of kind of putting yourself into the background, first of all. You cannot be the center anymore. Like in traditional instruction, so-called instruction, right? The teacher is there, all the attention towards them. And the teacher is the source of everything that you're about to learn that day, right? Like literally, this whole curriculum just drives me crazy.
Right.
And
like,
I
tell me
know
what to do. What are we doing today? And they're like,
yeah,
here's what
yeah,
you
exactly.
do.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I mean, even our kids sometimes still like, what are we doing today? I'm like, I don't know, what are we doing today? So I'm like I'm part of the group. I also ask that question.
Yeah.
So you, on one hand, you kind of like facilitating. I like how facilitation is making learning easy, right? To make it easy. So I'm there to support what they want to do. So I'm there to ask questions. So, we really love the Socrates method here because it's all about asking questions, being curious, and that's what you model, really the curiosity. So a lot of times, and I advise parents to do the same. Stop kind of like looking top down on your child and being like, oh, what are you going to do? What are you doing? Or things like that. Just start doing something yourself. So what you want to model is your genuine curiosity, your love for learning. And it's so inspirational for kids when they see you learning, you engaged into some activity. And that's so instead of using curriculum, and I know sometimes kids have those days, and that's another thing, you need to understand that we're all humans. One day we're inspired, full of energy, ready to learn. Other days we're not, we just literally want to do maybe nothing or just be what we call lazy in this culture, right? But maybe just slow down. And that's okay too. Sometimes kids are slow. So facilitator has to really be so in tune. And as a parent, you also have to be in tune with your child, with who they are, what kind of rhythms they have, depending on the day of the week, even, Mondays can be always like a difficult day because after the weekend, or Fridays is a different day. And if you're into like energies and all that stuff, that also affects, especially like nature cycles and things like that. So as a facilitator, you really need to be in tune with another person. And at the same time, you're not like a servant or peasant there, right? Okay, I'm gonna do this to you, and do you do this for you because you ask me. There's a balance of also consenting to things and modeling consent to them as well. If there are things that you do not like, maybe even, how they treat your body. Kids love like rough playing, but the facilitator still can demonstrate how to say no to that kind of playing, how to set boundaries. And then, of course, when it comes to conflict resolution, I see schools love to put that stuff, social emotional. And I'm like, I don't think kids get a lot of opportunities to actually practice that skill in regular school, because most of the time they have to be quiet, pay attention to something that they not always interested in, right? So here we have just so many opportunities to learn social emotional, because you constantly share space together, you're constantly making decisions together, you're constantly facing people who might be, in a different mood than you that day. And then you, of course, because we center play is actually like the best way of learning any social emotional skill. And doesn't matter how old they are. I literally hate when they're like, they have to play until the age, and then they set the age of like, this is normal to play until whatever, 6, 7. Some people say, older. I'm like, play is part of our life. If we as adults don't play, I mean, how boring is that, right? So as a facilitator, there is that playfulness, and we call it flow, that you have to be. And as parents as well, we get so heavy from the life and responsibilities. So bring that playfulness back into your lives, whether it's through just even board games. There's a term, game schooling. Some people just school their kids through board games, which is super fun too. But giving them opportunities to play with each other and actually stay away from those games. That's like by Peter Gray, which many of you probably read, Free to Learn, that I wouldn't call it unsupervised, but when a facilitator facilitates by not participating in their games, that's like an interesting, right, approach, because you would say, wait, but you have to jump in, you have to be there. No, like the best way I see it a lot of times is that I might start something, and when it takes off, I just withdraw myself completely, because I want them to start figuring out the rules. I want them to start to figuring out relationships, And I find that a lot of times facilitator has to really work with their egos, because teacher ego is like, when you're a teacher, you're constantly like, oh, I taught them this, I taught them that, right? You're like really puffed up. But as a facilitator, you really become humble because you see how valuable when they got it, they figure it out for themselves. If they met some kind of challenge and they overcame it, or even if they didn't, you there to support them and ask them question and provide some care in those moments. But you really putting them in the center. That's why it's called child-centered, right? So facilitator is a lot about knowing how to just be humble in a way, being in the flow. And I guess one last point that I'm noticing, and Mercedes and I talked about it, we actually found the person who might provide this for us as community, for parents specifically, not even for kids. As you know, it's very popular to talk about mindfulness, right? Practice mindfulness. What I notice is that as parents, as facilitators, we have to model that. The mindfulness is a lot about being present, being able not to just like control and suppress your emotions, but really know how to deal with your emotions. And same goes with your mind, right? How to understand when your mind is just talking and chattering, and how to find the peace and calmness. Because a lot of parents, I think, struggle with homeschooling, not because they think, oh, I'm not educated enough, but they think it's too chaotic. It can be too loud. There's a lot of emotions. You actually have to face your own emotions while you're with kids, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the whole deschooling, unschooling, and just healing happens. And
Mm.
that's one of the things for facilitators that I think they really need to be like centered and grounded in some kind of meditation practice, some practice that allows them to really be in pure presence, and even if, and notice if their emotions comes in, notice if their schooling comes in, and making sure they address it, you know, maybe not during the day, maybe like after they have a space to really address it and understand what is it that triggered me today, you know, how to work with those triggers and understand deeper why, for example, the cleanup, that's a big part of the day, right? But cleaning is not, you know, like we had this conversation with radical learning. What is cleaning? Everyone has so many different relationship with cleanups, right? With cleaning. How do you not force someone? How can it become kind of like a natural act of, I don't know, at the end of the day, because you did
Responsibility.
responsibility, right? How do you, can you really teach that? You know, how do you go about it? So that was like a big one. But also as facilitator, if you don't address your own issues around cleaning or cleanliness or messiness, it doesn't look like you will be able to come into space and facilitate that process in like a very easy, light way, and, you know, see what happens. I mean, Mercedes laughing and smiling, I think.
I'm just laughing. I love this topic so much. I didn't think about it as deeply until it came up in the radical learning. And I'm like, this is so true and bringing up so many issues for me right now. I just love the word. It took me because I thought about it, that question itself, where does having cleanliness come from? And like where it goes back into your family. And when we talk about modeling, if the home environment is chaotic and then you bring a child to school and then you're expecting them to want to maintain a cleanliness, it's an interesting question. And it's definitely something that I know Oxana doesn't struggle with as much as I do whenever I have to facilitate, because I'm still in the mindset of like, clean up everyone, you know, coming through, and then everyone's just going to be like, okay, she said it's time to clean up. We got to clean up. It's not like that at all. So again, you have to be willing to model and look at yourself and say like, is this going to be helpful, me pushing kids to clean even though they don't want to? So it's a really interesting way to look at it, and the whole schooling thing in general too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the interesting facts that I wish someone adult would have told me, they said, I wish they would have said, doing laundry and cleaning dirty dishes is a part of life. I don't know why it is. It's just a part of life. Versus like, oh, it's like a punishment or it's a chore. It's like, no, you can find the gratitude that you do have clothes to wash, that you do have food to eat, right? Get down to the basics of this life. You know, that's why the Declaration of Independence over 200, almost 250 years ago, is that you have unalienable rights to your life and liberty. Of course, pursuit of happiness, but your life is the number one thing, and that's what gets disrespected in these schools. You said a few things I want to touch on. One is when the child comes and they're not super excited for something today. Maybe they are going through some emotional stuff, and the importance of solitude, right? Like it's okay to be quiet. It's okay to read a book by yourself all day. Like you don't have to participate. And so as the facilitator, you know, you don't have to force anything. You want to, like you said, be present and try to tune in to what their needs are, because this is not about the facilitators and the teachers. It's about the child, and it's about them unfolding this brilliance which they're born with. I love the quote from Buckminster Fuller. He said, every child's a born genius. The problem is they get de-geniused trying to please their teachers and please their parents. And I felt that too as a kid. I got rewarded when I was good at sports. I would get approval from the adults, the coaches, parents. So I'm like, okay. And I liked running around and playing ball, you know, fine. But as I matured, I could see this programming still inside me. I'm trying to get people's approval for whatever, you know, papers, assignments, and these kind of things. And by doing that for so long, we get disconnected with the most important relationship, is me with me. Because if I can be compassionate and know about me, then I can be compassionate and I can listen to you. But so many people are living from their head. And this is where it's like, no, it's not a head game. It's a heart game. It's a soul game, a spirit game. And it's a lifestyle. right? So it's like, this is the importance of training parents. And I find that the parents are the ones who have the biggest trouble to get their kids out or to reprogram themselves. The kids are like, okay, out of school, boom, self-directed learning, boom, I'm ready to go. But the parents are like, oh my gosh, he's 10 years old and he can't read, or these kind of worries, or the milestones, right? These fake milestones that were made up by universities to benefit the education system. And let me just touch on that, because I think that was a big red pill for me that liberated me, which was what, man, the government schools are mandatory to make employees for the corporations, to make clerks and consumers of their products and soldiers for the military. There's no way that's true. And so you go down that rabbit hole and you're like, goodness gracious, this is a really big problem. And what Dr. Peter Gray said, this is in New York, I saw him say it live, this must have been 7-8 years ago. He said the forced schooling system is as big as the civil rights movement, like it was in the 60s. Like, the colored folks are getting discriminated against. Well, now both colors, all the colors, the children are being discriminated against. So we need to liberate them and really focus on their needs rather than the adults who, again, they don't know what the future is going to look like. It's just going to be faster pacing change and leadership. That's part of my training too, is empowering leaders, helping them develop. They're already leaders, right? The kids come out 5 years old, I'll help. So if you make the dishes fun, you make the laundry fun, doing chores fun, where it's like, hey, you want to help daddy, you want to help mommy, they'll be like, yeah, I'll help. And there's a great book that I recommend for parents. It's called For the Children's Sake. It's by a French guy, Leandro Bergeron. I said his name wrong, but he treated his 3 daughters as honored guests in his home. So how would you treat an honored guest in your home? Would you force them to do stuff? Would you force them to go to bed? Would you, tell them what to do? No, if they're honored guests, maybe for some people it's a business person, or, hopefully not a politician, but maybe someone that you love, a grandparent or someone, you would let them direct their own day, and you would help them and facilitate them and invite them to do stuff. And maybe you can, see if they're open to suggestions. But the whole force thing is what's anti-human, in my opinion. And the result is his 3 daughters ended up transforming the family farm, they like tripled the profits, and they all grew up and had successful adult lives because they were treated as honored guests in the home. And when I'm reading that story, I'm like tearing up. I cry when I hear these things, because I'm like, I knew there was a better way. I knew there was a way that we can respect children, because we are the children and we want them to be the leaders. And my guess is that your children, Mercedes and Oxana, are being the leaders. And I think I might have met some of them at Music in Sky, full of life, full of joy and excitement. And one thing I love about the meeting process is that if you're 10 or 12 or 14, whatever age you are, and you learn how to facilitate a meeting or participate in a meeting, get enrollment or agreement in a meeting, or compromise or figure out these things, that's a high level executive skill. That's a business CEO type skill, and they're going to be able to use that no matter where they go in life. So that's a very great point that you brought up.
Can
Yeah,
I
I
add
love it.
something, David, about it?
Yeah.
While you're here, what's interesting, because Mercedes and I, we looked at so many we were building our website and we're trying to get the message through what we are standing for, and we even started to question the word leadership, surprisingly, because in a way, I guess we asking parents to think what is success for them and what is leadership really means to them as well.
Yeah.
Because I think I grew up being actually brainwashed by word leadership. Like, you're the one who's going to change the world. And I know, like, even whatever Gen X right now, Z, I'm confused with that. But even they say, oh, we feel like we have this burden on us, like as if previous generation failed and now it's up to us to make these things right.
Wow.
Be the
Yeah, they
leader.
feel all the heavy burden and like uncomfortability. Yeah.
So what
Yeah,
we don't talk about leadership. It's almost like the way I see it, at least at the space right now with the kids that we have, that we don't use leadership, but we use personal responsibility, and it just comes out in different shapes. based on actually some kind of that inclination in the kid. You know, sometimes like I want to tell this beautiful story about Mercedes's daughter at Music in Sky. My son hurt himself and she ran, or like ran from, it was really far away. She went to get help to get like the thing, right? She was the only one who did that. You know, everyone else was kind of like, it's gonna be fine, or whatever they decided, right? But she's like, so she's a really good friend. That's just her thing naturally, you know, she cares about people. So her leadership will show up in those moments. Maybe she doesn't like to speak up during morning meetups or be like, hey guys, let's go do that, right? You know, again, like you really need to question all the terms when you talk about leadership, what leadership means to you, you know, and to your family, what success means to you and your family. So I'm just giving an example that I've seen kids doing amazing things, but based on their talents. So, and the same goes for an entrepreneurship. I don't like that word, but I know that a lot of families like pushing that idea. First of all, I think it's very hard to be an entrepreneur, which we are essentially here, right? Like it is hard in this country. It's not very much supported as I think it used to be maybe, but I think it's not easy. But I also see that not every kid is like that. Not everyone wants to do that. So you can't again force that mindset of money making or that kind of success. You again have to tune in into this kid and see if they will shine in that aspect, just like music, singing, I don't know, making things out of clay, building with your hands. It's great to be exposed to those things. And that's like something I want to talk about, because in self-directed learning, it's not like you just let your kids, okay, go ahead, kids, you know, it's up to you now. No, it's a supported environment, and you create a lot of opportunities for them to be exposed to things. One book that we recommend with Mercedes is Changing Our Minds, right? Is that I'm pronouncing it correct, right, Mercedes?
Yep, Naomi Fisher.
Naomi Fisher. Love the book because she describes what resonated with me as facilitator specifically, 2 phases that kids go through. One phase is discovery learning. They just discover things, literally just being exposed day in, day out, exposed to different activities. And do not expect, that's one of the things when you were talking about, like, for example, cleaning or helping with laundry. I think we as parents, and especially if you were lucky enough to actually spend young years with your kid and don't give them to the daycare, you can see those milestones, how naturally they meet them if you stop forcing them, or when you change your expectations. You know, like you said, there are these milestones. At this age, they have to read. But when they're younger, at this stage, you have to talk. At this age, they have to walk. At this age, blah, blah, blah. So that only programs us to stop tuning into our kids, like their actual being, soul, what they want, what they need, right? And start again rely on external information. Oh, well, but that and that person said this is the right thing to do. Same goes with reading. You know, we constantly get this question, but how do you teach academics? How do you teach academics? So, which they mean reading, writing, and math, right? I'm like, what's the other thing? So again, that's like a false belief that apparently on the scale of skills, those are top priority. Well, they're actually not. You know, there are people who never liked math, actually got traumatized by math at school and still healing as adults because yeah, I mean, that's true. They still healing because they have this false belief, I'm not good at math. You know, I'm not good at math. But what is math? You know, like you really have to ask that question then. And I see the kids learning very easily basic math skills once you, I don't like the word allow, but once you agree with them to start having some money relationship. The early on you do that, the early on, just out of environment, they learn what is the value, what value of things. And how to, even like consumption, right? You might think, oh, they're just gonna consume like crazy and buy all this bad things, but just like adults, think of, let's think about our experiences. Think the first time you made your own money. Did you really like, okay, I'm gonna save 20% and then I'm gonna do this, right? Usually we just blow it, we're so excited. So the kids are the same, they can totally go buy a bunch of, especially if there is a lot of restrictions around like the food that they consume or sugar, which again, that's another topic, but they'll go and buy all the candies they want because there's my money and I'm going to decide what I want to do with it. So like all those skills, they come naturally when we do things with them. That's why self-directed learning is not just letting your kid, be wild and free in that sense, but connecting with them, tuning with them, creating environments for them where they can learn about themselves. I like what you said about it. If you don't know who you are, you can't listen to your body, you can't listen to your true desires, because after coming out of school, usually people don't know who they are, what they want to do. And now it's time to figure it out, right? Somehow. So can just imagine the generation of kids who will grow up asking that question and actually being able to act on it every day, like every day of their life. How different the world will look like without even telling them that they have to be leaders, like without the kind of like the programming of leadership, just create a space for them to already do it every day.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. It's a good point to question everything and to really get clear on your own terms. There's various dictionaries out there. There's the Webster's Dictionary. There's Black's Law Dictionary. So these are all guys who said this word means this, and they made it up, right? Maybe at the time that's what the word meant, but I envision the future where the language is including these types of things about voluntary learning. That phrase also gets me very excited because as long as it's voluntary, I'm all for it. If the son or daughter wants to choose to go to Montessori, Sudbury, or whatever they want to do, and they're happy there, fine. But don't force my children to do anything, because the world is the way it is right now because of us and our parents and our grandparents. God bless them. So yes, there is leadership needs, but the most important person to lead is yourself. So even if you just lead this body and figure out what you want to do with your life, I think that's one of the best questions. I'm curious how you guys deal with this in your center, because in my coaching, I don't like asking parents or, even hearing them ask their child, what do they want to do when they grow up? It's like, what do you want to do now? Like, how do you project what's going to happen in the future? Nobody knows. So how about today? What is exciting to you today? And I have a funny story from a 3-year-old girl who she made it on the Ellen DeGeneres show because her mom was a dancer, what's super viral, and the 3-year-old daughter is there mimicking, doing the dances, very cute, girl and family and everything. And so Ellen asks her this question on national television. She says, so when you grow up, do you want to be a dancer? And the 3-year-old looks at Ellen, she says, I am a dancer. It's like, you're on national television for dancing. There's nowhere to go. It is now. So again, getting back to present moment consciousness, I think is a very important thing for parents to get out of their heads, put the old programming down and say, okay, where are we at now? Breathe. I don't know if you guys have meditation corners or something like that, like a place to be silent or to go outside or something like that. But sometimes I don't want to be around people. Sometimes I want to be in my room, or I want to be in nature and I don't want to talk to anybody. And sometimes I want to be with people. And I think every human has that type of component. I want to touch on also intelligences, because you mentioned like some people, they're maybe good at science or maybe not good at business or whatever it is. Howard Gardner has 8 types of intelligences that he talks about. And so there's lyrical, musical, spatial visualization, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and a few more. And I think that's pretty good. Instead of just reading, writing, and math, there's like 5 more. And then I read a quote by John Gatto, and he said, an education should be as unique as your fingerprints. I said, whoa, if that's the case, then there's not 8 types of intelligences. There are 8 billion types of intelligences, and I'm different from you, you're different from them. So it's not my job to project on them what I envision their intelligence to be, but to ask questions. And the word education, actually, the root word means educo, means to elicit or to draw from within. So they're already brilliant, intelligent geniuses. That's how the divine creator made them, I believe. And so as a facilitator, you're just kind of like putting fuel or putting materials around or asking questions, but it's really up to them. And when the child gets to the point where they're like, I'm responsible for my life, that's, I think, one of the big steps in maturity, because they're like, oh, and you get to see it in like an obituary. This is a very good exercise for 10, 12 teenager students to read. Read the obituary section in a newspaper, and you'll see a whole arc of a life in the obituary section. And you'll say, oh, born in this year, and they did this, and they education, and in family, and in their career and life. And it's like one paragraph. And so the teenager, the child begins to say, oh, that's their life, that's their life. And then they discover that they have a life on earth too, and they're going to have an arc of a story for their own life. And it's a, I would say, very empowering thing to realize, like, okay, I'm in charge now. My mom and dad love me. I can trust them. But what my life is going to look like is going to be in my hands, and it's no one else's responsibility. Like you said, Oxana, like you graduate high school and they're like, well, what do you want to do with your life? And you're like, I thought you was just telling me what to do, and all of a sudden it changes. And I can't remember if it's the high school ceremony, but for sure the college ceremony, they call it, the graduation ceremony is called commencement. And that means to begin, not to end. So they're throwing off their hats and they're like, we're finished. Like, no, you're just getting started. And to have this realization that this is a lifelong thing. It's a very blessed thing to be a human, to have a body. If we have people around us that love us and care for us, that's a great blessing. So many people don't have that, but they have single parent families, or, disconnected from their grandparents. So noticing the blessings and the gratitude, I think, is also one of the good types of curriculum that I facilitate. And in my homeschool leader group, I have like 20 types of curriculum that I created. And I start, when I teach parents or train them, it's like curriculum, like, first of all, what does that word mean, right? Curriculum comes from the word a course or a path. So you have a path, your partner has a path, your child has a path. What is their path? We don't know, but it's going to require the love of learning. It's going to require persistence, focus, all these things. And to think that one curriculum is going to be the solution, I think is a confused perspective. So it's like, open up the whole world as learning. Notice that life is continuous learning, and we have the world at our fingertips right now. This is an incredible time to be alive. We're seeing institutions, crumble, and powerful predators, be exposed. And now the new stars are rising. And I believe that is your sons and daughters out there, and the people that are hearing this. It is a beautiful time. So don't get caught up in the negative stuff you see on the news, but tune into these kind of conversations, because there's a lot of people that are starting to discover the power of self-directed learning. And you ladies are some of the leaders, or I don't know if you want to be called leaders now, but creators, however you want to be called. But we're coming to the top of the hour. Any final conclusions or thoughts you want to share in this session? We probably should have another session again, because this conversation is just very fascinating. I think is helping a lot of parents out there. Any final thoughts for, let's see, we're in end of July now, and this back to school season is here. So what could you say to maybe parents in the Bay Area that are maybe considering joining your center or joining some type of voluntary learning school? Any words of encouragement or insights that they must be thinking or struggling with at this point?
Mercedes, you go ahead. Talk too much.
Well, I want to end with, like, what we've been talking about is redefining language and using different language and how we learn and what the world looks like. And especially the thing about leadership. If you would have asked me 10 years ago if I was going to be having to lead finding a learning village, like I never saw myself in this role. So again, just leadership looks different in many different ways. So I love that you guys had talked about that, and you use the example of my own daughter too, because we get so stuck in our definitions of things, and then we lose sight of what actually can really be happening. So I think my biggest let's see, takeaway or ask is really just to have parents take a look at what's going on with their children and really start to be connected with whatever's happening, whatever path you're on, whatever you're choosing. Really redefine what learning looks like in your family environment, and make sure that it's happening where, you know, you're putting that expectation for whatever it is, the school, wherever you're outsourcing that. Because one thing's for certain, your children will learn from someone. Who is that going to be? That's the question to ask yourself. You know, you don't get to qualify the people that your children are in front of for hours at a time. You know, so they're learning their habits, what they bring, you know, to that room and that container of learning, or whatever you want to call it, is happening there. So, yeah.
I want to add to that,
beautiful.
that start looking for your village. I mean, we didn't really touch on that component much, but community is everything. That's why wherever you live, look around and see if this is actually environment and this is actually the people you want to raise your kids with. And if this is not the place, this is not, they don't share the values that you have, you know, yeah, you'll have to move somewhere, or just reach out, start looking for those people, find those who align with you. Because at some point your kids will be teenagers and they might not listen to you anymore. They will listen to maybe a parent of your, you know, of another child or your friends. So you really want to make sure that you create a village where kids can turn towards others, you know, other adults maybe for advice. And in our case, we also are very blessed to have elders in our community that a lot of people don't have their, you know, grandparents living nearby. So it's really nice when we have opportunities to host elders in our space. And that's like a beautiful natural learning that happens through shared stories or learning skills all together. So create your village today, start looking for people. The village may be just 2 or 3 families, you know, to start with, but create those beautiful. And one thing for homeschoolers specifically, play date at the park once per week is not enough. I'm sorry, but that's what I believe in. It's exciting, they get to play, but really a lot of stuff we get to learn when we are together in the space throughout time, and through spaces where sometimes parents are not present or sometimes it's not led by adults. So make sure they have some consistency in community where they can be even when they don't feel good, you know, even when it's not fun and exciting. Like you said, even on days when they need solitude, help them to express that in community, help them to see it in other community, in other members of community. I honestly think this is one of the things that probably not many people prioritize anymore with all the online learning, online schools, you know, like a lot of people get very comfortable, cozy in their sweatpants, sitting in front of computers, not seeing people, you know. I think it's kind of became celebrated in mainstream media that, oh, okay, I'm staying home, I'm not seeing people. And I think there is something about continuous, like continually be with others that helps us to learn many things. So I'm just encouraging everyone to create their villages, create those micro communities, and see what's going to happen.
That's right. Yeah, one of my philosophies is that when good people come together, good things happen. So you don't even have to have a plan, you know, just find some people that have some freedom of choice beliefs, that don't believe in forcing people to do stuff. And then you get together and then you just have a conversation as adults. You know, adults know what's going on if you believe in freedom, and like, hey, what's going on around us? Okay, you know, what's some solutions? So yeah, maybe we should do something, maybe a couple days a week or something like that. And for me, I am helping to raise or help parents raise their children to be moral leaders. Because with the whole last 4 years, I'm like, where's the moral leadership on this planet? You know, it's like it used to be like Martin Luther King or some community organizer or Muhammad Ali, you know, back in the day. They drafted him to go, you know, to Vietnam. And he says, just take me to jail, man. I don't want to go kill anybody. Like, we need that. And so I realized it's going to come from this type of community where children are treated with respect. You get consent. You have boundaries. You're able to communicate. And these are very high level skills. So if that's all they learn in a self-directed learning environment, these are very valuable skills. So I hope mom and dads will look beyond the reading, writing, and arithmetic, which are important, but I think connecting with yourself and learning how to listen to other people, have compassion with other people, make an offer, make an ask, you know, make a counter offer, and begin to negotiate, you know, the day, you know, like children are amazing negotiators because they're so determined when they want something. And that's great, you know, so a matter of just how to facilitate them in something that's good for them. And so many good things that we discussed here on the show. And where can parents contact you for a tour or an offering, or are you guys accepting students, or what's the status now as we go into the fall season?
Yes, we're definitely accepting students. I don't like to call them students. I'm like, God, can we start talking some other
Start
language?
over.
Let's do it. Let's create it right now. Right now, Oksana. What do we
I
want to
mean,
call them? Just the young people, the learners?
Young people, learners, let's call them that. We have a website, luminarylearningvillage.org. Please learn. We have an amazing FAQ page where you can learn more about this approach. Dig deeper, find some resources, and then you can find more details about our program. And yeah, please fill out the form. It's right there on the website. And we also have our Instagram, which is also on our website. So if you want to see some fun reels that kids make a lot of times and just enjoy, be the witness of what we do day in and day out, you can also follow us on Instagram.
Yes, excellent. Well, ladies, very nice. Thank you for sharing some time and a great conversation. And please keep up the good work. This is the future of education, in my opinion, self-directed learning education. So I hope you continue, and a lot of people will join you. And yeah, we learn together and we help each other, and hopefully we'll have another conversation about this in the future. And yeah, just kind of dive deeper, because this topic is going to be hotter next year, hotter the year after that, just going to continually increase. And I have a dream of intergenerational freedom, which is the transfer of the knowledge of the truth of self-ownership to the young people around us. So these ideas, they liberated me, and I feel the liberation spirit amongst you and amongst the Music and Sky community and the other communities I'm a part of, and maybe you too as well. So thanks for being here on Education Options TV, where we are helping empower parents by introducing them to respectful models of learning. We'll see you guys on the next video.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
You're welcome. Bye.